I would tell these stories to my friends in Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, and they would be like, wait, what? You did what to an animal? You did what at Thanksgiving? And I'd be like, wow, I guess these are interesting stories. I thought everybody did that on Thanksgiving. I didn't realize it. That was really the impetus of the book and where I got the idea for it. This is from chapter 2. This funny thing happens when people ask where I'm from, especially when I'm in academic conferences where people are so often from uninteresting places. Mississippi, I say. Oh, wow, they say. I can tell they've never seen a real live racist before. Or at the very least, someone who's related to a racist or has seen one in the wild. It's exciting for them. They want to tweet it. They want to write a memoir about it. So they say, what's Mississippi really like? I can tell what they really want to ask is, what was it like to grow up around crazy people who believe that whatever can't be shot should be baptized? But they are afraid to ask because they are not yet sure if I am one of those people. I am, kind of, not really, sometimes. I do believe in the power of Jesus and rifles. But to keep things interesting, I also believe in the power of NPR and the scientific method. It is not easy explaining all this to educated people at cocktail parties. So instead, I tell them that it was basically just like Faulkner described it, meaning that my state is too impoverished to afford punctuation. That I have seen children go without a comma for years. That I've seen some families save their whole lives for a semicolon. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, but Pop did not like it there. It was too progressive. The public schools were too clean, the hospitals too well equipped. Sure, they had jobs there, but they also had sidewalks, for God's sakes. Pop was a country boy and did not know what to think about sidewalks. And God almighty, all the boys did was ride bikes and play video games and sit around getting sissified. If you wanted to toughen up your kid, teach him about knives and woods and whatnot, your only resource was the goddamn Boy Scouts. My father really hated the Boy Scouts. Why they gotta make them boys wear them dang neckerchiefs, he said. It's sissy enough as it is. I mean, a pine box derby. Make them little boys play with toys and play camp out in the middle of the city, and then go and make them wear a dang lady scarf. It ain't right. You're too old for such silliness as that. I was 6. So true. Oh, that happened. I asked him, I said, Pop, I want to be in the Boy Scouts, and he got so mad at me. I think he made me go out and shoot a bird just when I asked him to do it. Just, go, son, go shoot something. They ain't got guns in the Boy Scouts now. Anyway, it's a picture of my family. Some people don't know who these folks are. When the audience is full of mostly young people, people are like, I don't think that's his family. Does anybody remember the dog's name? The dog's name here? Flash. Give her a free book. Flash. Dukes of Hazzard. This is really the picture of the South that was in popular culture when I was 5 in 1980, and I remember watching the Dukes of Hazzard on TV on Friday night, right before Dallas. You guys remember the TV show Dallas? Dallas was the rich white people. These were sort of like poor white people. But this was the representation of the South. It was so fun and not at all like reality. You see no black people in this cast, and also their teeth are way too white. That's how you know they're not real rednecks. The teeth are all too clean. I can say that. Now Cooter, you remember Cooter, right? He was kind of a cracker, but anyway. This is my real family, and this is my father. This is Pop here, my dear mother. It's my half-sister, who I don't even mention in the book. We can talk about why later. And this is my brother, Bird. And if you ever wonder who's going to write the memoir in the family, go look at the family pictures, and whoever has this expression. It's like I'm signaling for help. Most people think babies are cute. Nobody thought I was a cute baby, and everybody in my family made sure I knew it. My grandmother would say, "Well, you kind of had a high forehead." I don't mess a baby up. Golly. Anyway, there's another picture of my family. Again, the classic expression here. We've gone from horror to disenfranchisement. This is about, I'm going to say, probably about 9 months old. This is about 4. So radical evolution, but still not feeling like I fit in very much. And one thing I noticed, and if you want to write a memoir, and if you take writing classes, or even if you're just in your basic English composition classes, you'll often have to write about yourself or your family. That's an itch that lives with most people who love to read. At some point, feel an urge to write about your family or to tell stories about your family. I highly recommend looking at old photographs and really sitting with them to see what you see there. Now, when I looked at this picture when I was, 10 years old, because, before social media, you had photo albums somewhere in a coffee table somewhere. You probably had a bunch of boxes of photographs. At your mom's or your grandmother's house, they probably still have those. And every now and then we'd pull them out and look. So when I was younger, I looked at this and didn't see much of anything. I was like, oh, look, I was in a bad mood. I was probably hungry, needed a nap, whatever. But the older you get, the more you start to see things. And one of the things that I saw in this was I was not the only person with a scowl. There was somebody else who had one too. And in so many family pictures, I started to see that I didn't fit in, and there was somebody else who looked like he wasn't having a great time either, and it was my father, who I'd always felt so different from my father, who had a high school education, never went to college, and was as different from me as two close relatives can be. But the more I started looking at photos, the more I started to see similarities between him and me, and that's a horrifying moment. Most young people identify themselves as against something. At this point, a lot of, most of you here tonight are in college, many of you for the first time, and you are telling yourselves a story about yourselves and the people that you're related to. And that story is probably, I'm not like them. I'm different. Maybe not special, maybe you feel less than, maybe you feel like they're all awesome and you suck at whatever it is that your family's good at, or maybe you feel like really superior and that they're all stupid and country and backwards or whatever. And you may feel all of that at the same time. But I found that they really are. I mean, there were some girls that I dated in college, and they had such happy families. They all loved each other, and they had like family jokes, and they would all go sing karaoke together, and it's so weird to me that they all got along. It felt so unnatural to me. But generally in my experience, that most of us do feel very separate and different. And it's very important to find ways to connect with the family that you don't want to be anything like. And the experience of writing this book was really that experience for me. Again, this was the last photo taken of me before I started drinking, in which I smile. This was the very first time I went hunting. Now, this book is not so much about hunting, and I mean, there's really only like 3 hunting chapters in it, honestly, out of 23, so it's not a hunting book. But it's not so much about hunting as hunting representing that thing that everybody in my family loved that I did not. And everybody's got that in their families. Maybe it's football, maybe it's football, it's Mississippi. Maybe it's religion, maybe it's education, maybe it's art, right? I mean, maybe whatever it is, everybody's got that thing. And for me, for my family, that thing was hunting. This was the very first time I went hunting. I'm smiling because I don't realize what hunting is like yet. I will learn very shortly. Again, who else is smiling? This dude up here, my dad is smiling. What's strange is that if you can see here, it's 3:40 in the morning. This was every Saturday for me that wasn't baseball season. This is what it was like. It was getting up. I don't know, I don't know if you slept in on Saturday mornings and like watch cartoons. I had fantasies about watching cartoons. That's all I wanted to do. When we got a VCR, I learned how to record the Looney Tunes. And I would record the Looney Tunes that came on from like 10 to 11, and I would record it. And when we would get home from hunting or from whatever farm he had leased me out to haul hay, I would get home and I would pop in that tape and I'd watch Looney Tunes, and I would feel like a little boy. Just all I wanted. I'm making it sound sad, but that really, I just wanted to watch cartoons, man, and be a kid. But from the time I was about 4 years old, I had to go kill things in the woods. So when my editor asked me if there was one photo that most summed up my childhood that we could use for the cover of the book, I was like, well, I've got one of my childhood swing set that I'll send you. That was it. This is the less gruesome side of the photo. This was my childhood swing set, and this is why my father bought it. It would give us a place to skin deer. I asked him, I'm like, why don't we have any swings in the middle, Pop? And he was like, well, you'll see. So sad. All right. Let's talk about hunting real quick. So hunting has really been sort of romanticized. Now, not for people in Mississippi. Y'all still sort of know what it's like. But in the wider culture, even in the South, really great magazines like Southern Living or Garden and Gun have sort of changed how we think about hunting. We see it now in terms of photographs like this. A bunch of wealthy people dressed in, Filson and Orvis wax cotton with neckties and breech loader guns, all about to go do something, fun and rich. And that's not what hunting was like in my experience. Hunting was, for me as a kid, was more like this. It was, he is wearing a necktie. The last of the well-dressed horror villains. For me, deer camp was a terrible, awful place. It smelled like blood. It was a double-wide trailer. We had, there were old church pews used for seating. It always smelled like guts. And if you've ever smelled, raise your hand if you've ever field dressed an animal. You know what it smells like. It's a very rich, potent smell. It smells like iron, and it smells like food, but not necessarily food you want to eat. It is a very potent smell, and still when I smell, it's not rotten. It doesn't smell like a rotten dead thing on the side of the road. It's not that. It's a much more sort of base, fundamental smell. It was a horrifying place. Deer camp was full of racism. I didn't realize until I was a little older that our deer camp was used as a Klan meeting house. I didn't know that. I mean, that's horrifying. There was a Confederate flag on the wall. No, those were more commonplace in the 80s in my childhood. But there was this other flag, and I didn't know what that flag was. I thought it was maybe like somebody's, school flag or something. It was a Klan flag. I didn't know that. You discover that stuff, you start looking at photos, and I remember asking my dad, I'm like, what is that? And he was like, oh, that's a Klan flag. I mean, how horrifying and strange to learn that this is what you had grown up inside. And then how do you go back through your past and start to pick those things out? Like, well, what does this mean? Well, what did that mean? Well, when that happened, what did that mean? Those are the questions that drive memoir. Like, who the hell am I, and who are my people, and how did we get like this? And how do I love somebody who maybe believed something I didn't believe, or did something that I thought was wrong and terrible and sinful? Like, do you just completely shun your family? What's Christmas like? What's Thanksgiving like when you learn stuff about your family that you didn't want to learn? It doesn't have to be racism. It could be something about religion or something about politics. There's plenty to get mad at your family about, guys, as y'all all know. And if you're in college, the first time you go home for Thanksgiving, they'll be waiting for some weird opinion from you about the world, and you'll wonder if you should tell them, and you'll tell them, and guess what? You'll fight. And you'll be like, I hate all of you, I'm going back to school. And you'll go back to school, and then you'll realize something will happen in your life, and you're like, oh, I'm them. You'll see it in the mirror. And it won't just be how you look. It will be something you say, something you do. It's horrifying. Growing up and learning who you are is horrifying. Here's a picture of my family now. I guess he's going to write the memoir? I don't know. It's funny, when I show this at colleges, most people know what I'm talking about, but some older audience members are like, I don't think that's his family. It wasn't the Dukes of Hazzard, but I don't think it's them. So this book isn't all about my childhood. It's also about my adulthood, because a lot of the questions that you have about your families won't be answered until you're older. Right now, you're wrestling with things, you're wondering who they are, who you are, but as you get older, you'll get married, you'll have kids, or you won't. You'll eschew those things. And through all those decisions, you'll really start to see your past and your childhood for what it was. That's why it's so hard to write memoir when you're in college. It's very difficult because you haven't had a lot of time to reflect on anything. I tell my students, if they're going to write memoir, that they have to pick something that's more than a decade old, a story, because that gives you a little time to deal with things. Let's see. I'll read you something about my wife. This is a picture of my wife a few months before our wedding. Beautiful. She's a beautiful lady. This guy was on TV at the time of her haircut. Every time I show this picture, do you guys know his name? This was the original MacGyver. His real name is, I think, Richard Dean Anderson. My wife is like, he's still good looking. There's no need. I'm like, what about me? She's like, well, your forehead's a little high. This is her now. She improved a lot. I talk about my beautiful wife a lot in the book, and so I feel the need to show evidence that, in fact, she is beautiful. Why she married me, she had a lot of college debt. Nobody knows why she married me. I'll read you a little story about her, though. This happened, let me find the right page here. So this story happened sort of in the middle of the book, and this was really a sort of turning point for me as I was writing it, because I really thought this would be a book about my childhood, and I realized I could not talk about my childhood without talking about my adulthood, because it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized who I was, who my family was, and what you guys have to do. I say you guys like I'm full of wisdom, and I'm not, but what I tell my students is that what you have to do is you have to pick through the refuse of your family for what's beautiful and good, and you got to find a way to keep that. And then you got to find the crap, and you got to kill it, and you got to jettison it, and you got to not carry on whatever terrible, maybe it's alcoholism, maybe it's abuse, whatever it is. Like, you got to find a way to pick the stuff that's good, keep it, find a way to hold on to it, and the stuff that's bad, find a way to push it away and kill it and not let it infect your children and their children, whatever those generational things are. And I say all this, I'm making it sound so heavy. Writing this way and trying to make it funny is really hard. It's really, really difficult. This is an example of me dealing with that whole, what do you keep from your past and what do you jettison? This was written... this story takes place in Starkville, Mississippi. I don't normally say that, but it's so cool to be back here. I like to explain to people where these stories happen. This was in Starkville when I was teaching there. I'd just gotten married. Here we were, a family, settling into the tender holiday moment. My wife returned with a bowl of popcorn and sat down, and I noticed Pop looking at her with that old sly grin. You know, he said to my young wife, I think your thighs may be getting bigger. When he said it, a kernel of popcorn lodged itself in the vestibule of my nasal cavity, preparing to repel from my nostrils and subdue the man with a flash grenade. I fully expected my wife to burst into tears and run from the room. Instead, she looked at her new father-in-law in a way that indicated he might want to insert his head up a mule's ass. I think she looks great, Mom said. She does, Pop said. It's a compliment. I like big thighs. I'm right here, she said. Can we please stop saying thighs, I said. Well, haunches is a word, Pop said. She's not a horse, I said. My wife left the room. Thanksgiving was over. Over the next few holidays, it got worse. Pop saying all sorts of things to my wife and our general area of holiday mirth. By Christmas, babies were all the rage. Just whatever you do, Pop said, I hope you don't breastfeed it. Alarms rang at the word breastfeed, and I quickly called in a code red. Let's watch a bass fishing program, I said. Nursing is the best thing you can do for a baby, my wife said. She was a woman of strong will with many opinions and did not yet fully understand that one does not discuss mammary glands with my father. Please, I said. And there followed a minor fracas over the merits of synthetic versus natural fluids for the infant, and it became clear that my mother had read an article sometime in the early 1970s explaining that breastfeeding was a primitive custom and that modern American mothers should instead nourish their young with Tang and Mr. Pibb. You people are crazy, said my wife. Ain't nothing will ruin a lady's chest like giving a baby too much titty milk. If I'd had a gun, I would have just started shooting everyone. Everyone stop right now, I said. I could see the disappointment in my wife's face at having married into a family where the word titty could be passed around at Christmas dinner as freely as a basket of warm crescent rolls. She looked at me and I smiled weakly. He can't help it, I said. He grew up on a dairy surrounded by animal teats. Well, teats is titties, Pop said. Stop saying titties, I said. It's all nipples, boy. What kind of people talk like this at Christmas dinner, said my wife. I could tell by her look that she considered me to be one of these people. So that was around the time of my life where I was like, wait, like the stuff I really hate about my dad, like I do that too. And I started to look at myself differently, and I started to look at him differently, and I realized that I could not wholesale reject everything about my family. I couldn't do it. Everywhere I went, I mean, by this time I had a PhD. I was in higher ed. I was teaching. After this, I was at Tulane University in New Orleans. And then I taught at a boarding school, and then I went to SCAD. I'm in all these places where you have fancy cocktail parties, and I so badly wanted to reject everything about my past. Was not that. I was the smart one. I was the progressive one. I was the one who, I went to church, but I listened to NPR, and I would donate to Fresh Air. So that made me smart. I just found I was really trying to reject so many things. I stopped going to the church I grew up going to. I stopped believing things that I believed when I was younger. I pushed away so many things. I didn't even speak to family anymore. And then all of a sudden I looked around, and this was when I was newly married. And, sorry, hold on a second. This is when I was married, and we started having kids. And I just realized if I reject everything about my family, there's nothing, I don't have a me anymore. There's no me. Whatever it is that makes me, that makes me awesome, that came from them too. So what's the bad stuff? So as an exercise, if you hate your family, congratulations. You might write a memoir too. Take out a piece of paper, not right now, but just if you have the inclination, and write down everything about your family you can't stand. Write it down. Everything you can't stand about your stupid cousins or your uncles or your grandparents or your parents or your siblings or the people you went to school with. And then on a different side of the paper, write down all the stuff that you love about yourself or that people like about you if they gave you a compliment. The thing, for me, when I was 18, I probably would have said, well, I think I'm funny. That was about it. I was decent in school. I got good grades, and I thought I was a pretty funny person. Whatever this stuff is in that right-hand column, that comes from your family too. That's not all you. And so the stuff you hate and the stuff you love about your people and yourself, it's all in one big family pot. And you have to find a way to go in there and pull the best out and throw the rest away. I'll read you one more thing before we take questions. Let's talk about what this book is about. It's not working here. Maybe this will work. Yeah, here we go. This book is about the South, family, farms, guns, fighting. There's a whole football chapter, racism, childbirth, marriage, misogyny, crack, neighbors who may smoke crack, your half-cousins also being your step-brothers. Mostly it's about fathers. Real quick, let's go back to that last one. Here tonight, a couple, they had to leave early. So this is just classic Mississippi. So a guy comes up to me and he's like, so my grandfather's name was Monk, last name Key, Monkey. And this guy goes, now, I'm related to some Keys. My grandma was a Key. You wouldn't know a Monk, would you? And I was like, it's my grandfather. And he's like, no kidding. He's like, now, where does a Scott come from in your name? I was like, well, my grandmother was a Scott. He's like, I got Scots too. I was like, I think it should be on different trees, man. He's like, you don't want to see this tree. I was like, I believe it. When you read the first chapter, it will help if you have visual aids. My half-brother, Bird, used to be my step-cousin. My mother and my aunt were married to the same man. That makes it comes home real quick when you say it that way. So this guy's talking to me and he's like, man, I can't believe it. And he's texting his friends and I'm texting my mom and posted a picture. And then his wife, my brother-in-law, is related to his wife. It's not right. I was like, so which one of us is inbred? He's like, I think we all inbred, man. He's like, we seem to be doing all right, though. Oh, I miss it. I miss Mississippi so much. Mostly it's a book about fathers. Here's a picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of my dad and me. It's a funny name for a book, The World's Largest Man. I did some interviews. All right. Everybody makes fun of, people from the South or conservatives being dumb, but liberals are real dumb too. I don't know if y'all know that. That sounds so mean. Everybody's dumb, guys. And there's smart people on both sides of the aisle too. But I can remember I was so shocked by how many people who worked for National Public Radio when they would interview me about the book were so bad with understanding a metaphorical title, because the interview would invariably start off like this. So, how big is your dad? Here's a real picture of us. I'm easy to spot with my trademark horrified stare. There's my father here looking proud. There's Bird looking like he just got hit in the head with a brick. So I'll read you a little bit. And then I'll stop. Let's see here. This is a funny book, but it's not all funny. Okay. Guys, I'll tell you this. I really resisted writing a book about my dad. I did not want to be one of those guys who writes, like the son who writes a memoir about his father. What I didn't realize is that when most, and this is not true across the board, but statistically, if you look at the memoirs from the last 50 years, when women write about a parent, they write about their mother, and it's about disentanglement. It's about escaping. when men write memoirs about a family member. And so is Faulkner and Star Wars and Shakespeare. You know Shakespeare's dad was a real piece of work, and so was yours probably. Our mothers, most of them, tell us who they are. They tell us everything. Their hearts live on the outside of their bodies because we are their hearts and we are no longer inside them. But our fathers are always aliens. We were never inside them. Or maybe it's just me. As I got older, my relationship with Pop only got harder. He was just too large to be anything other than the Everest out before me, something to be scaled, conquered, known. I was not an untalented child, was blessed with modest intelligence and curiosity and a gift for making some people laugh, even my sister-in-law this one time. But if you have read even half of the chapters in this book, you know there was one thing I could not do, and that was to love what my father loved. I quested on woods and water and fields of play and farms of work. I quested like a real son of a bitch and could not find him in those places, or even myself. It took many years before I realized that I must have baffled him as much as he confused me. What must he have made of me with my love of baking and books and bow ties? What a riddling abyss I must have seemed to him when I announced that when I grew up, I desired very much to be a ventriloquist. My mother made sure I got a Bozo the Clown dummy that Christmas, and the only real trick I learned was to create a sense of shame and dread in my father. As I got older, I was no longer allowed to go grocery shopping with Mom or to help her in the kitchen because any boy who liked to cook must be a sodomite. When I was 12, I overheard a conversation between my parents where Pop described some horrible thing he'd caught me doing the day before. Mom didn't want to hear it, was afraid, but he insisted she know. You know what I found him doing? Pop said. I don't want to know, she said. He's a good boy. He's a good son. He was in our closet, he said. Doing what? Mom said, moaning, covering her ears. Sewing a goddamn potholder. It was a Father's Day present. Now, this is what's awesome about memoir. You write a book, and you try real hard to remember what happened. And if you're curious, you can ask me, how do you do that? How do you remember what happened so long ago? And it's not writing history. It's not writing a Wikipedia entry on your life. It's not comprehensive. You try to remember. You go into the internet, try to look at what the weather was like the day you graduated from high school. You look at all the clues you can get, and you dig and you dig and you dig. But still, you find that when you write a memoir, people will come to you. They will come to your readings. They will come to your signings, and they will tell you things that you forgot, and those things will blow your mind. And when I read that chapter, somebody raised their hand in the back. This was in some of the first book events I did, and it was my mom. And I was like, Mom, do you have a question? And she goes, I still got that pot holder. I've got it here. I carry it around in a special plastic bag. This was the pot holder that I made for my dad. And what's so cool, I learned how to do it in a crafts book that came with the World Book Encyclopedia. And there was a sewing section in there. And I made it. And what I didn't realize until my mom brought it to my house, my mom is insane, but she keeps everything, and this is her vindication for keeping everything, is I made it out of one of his hunting shirts. What a jackass kid I was. Clearly, I'm sending messages to my father by cutting up his hunting shirt and being like, Happy Father's Day. Can you imagine? He must have been like, that's why he was so mad about me not doing it. He liked the shirt. This is a real picture of him. I love this picture. It's such a great metaphor. I love it because he looks like such a badass in this photo. And guys, who is the world's largest man? It's not just my dad. It's every dad. Every dad is that. Either the reality of them is so big. That's why little boys want to wrestle their fathers. We want to test ourselves. We want to prove ourselves. But it's also why even if dad is not in the picture, even if it's an absentee father, that hole is the world's biggest hole. It's huge. And so I'm the world's largest man to my daughters. It's not just my dad, it's about every dad. I love this picture though, because he looks like such a badass. Even the horse kind of looks like a badass. Like, what, But what I love about it is this barbed wire. Isn't that just, there's always something keeping you from knowing others, especially for a young man, especially his father, at least in my case. Story has a happy ending. This is my family now. This was our Star Wars themed Christmas card from a few years ago. As you can see, I have 3 daughters here. This is my beautiful wife, and I think we know who's going to write the memoir in the family. Sad Yoda. Her name is Ferris, and she goes, when I do like one book event, she calls it a book tour. She's like, where are you going? I was like, I'm going to go to Mississippi and talk about my book. She goes, another book tour? And I was like, it's just one. She goes, are you going to show that sad Yoda picture? And she made the face. It's awesome. This is another picture of us. I'm the luckiest man alive. Normally I end with why you should get this book. Great, I don't have to. You have to buy it for class, which is awesome. 2 new essays. It's lighter, it's smaller, more affordable. It's a great Father's Day gift, a great Mother's Day gift. It meets all travel requirements for the TSA. It's indestructible, cannot be thrown away. No garbage can will accept it. And I'll have to say, we can't sell any here, but I do have a new book out this November. Congratulations, Who Are You Again? And I'm not going to read anything from this book, but this is a book about the American dream and what nobody tells you about it, good and bad. So if you want to do something creative with your life, if you want to start a business, if you want to do something that nobody in your family has ever done before, I'm the first man in my family to go to college. I was the first of my cousins to admit that I read books. Whatever you want to do, if you want to do something ambitious, this book is really written with students in mind of how do you do it and how difficult is it. I was so mad at how inspirational speakers just make everything sound amazing. Having a dream is amazing. What this book does is really break it down and show you how a dream will really try to eat you. A dream will try to take over your life if you let it. And that the American dream has to make room for things like family and friends and peace and not just money and fame. So there is that too. Guys, thank you so much for listening to me speak.